Well, all of the results from the December 2020 exam are out now. Level 3 came out yesterday, and Level 1 and 2 came out a few weeks ago. And I'm getting emails from a lot of candidates from a lot of different places that didn't make it past Level 1, 2, or 3. And they saw my name on LinkedIn from other candidates who had passed, thanking our site and thanking the instruction that we give. And they're reaching out saying, well, here are my results. What do you think? And it's hard to answer that question because all I'm seeing are results. I'm not seeing the process that the candidate went through. If they were our candidates, it's super easy. I could just go on our site. I can print out a history of their interaction on the site. I could see every mock exam they did, when they did it, what their score was. I could see all of their quiz questions. I could see their progress. Any footprint they leave, I can see it. So I can usually look at the progress and I can see where there's a problem. Well, if you're not our candidate, I'm really blind on a lot of these things. And you don't want to just keep saying, try again, put in more effort, etc. It might not be more effort that you have to put in. You might have put in a lot of effort. So it's not a question of put in more effort. At this point, we have to start thinking about put in different effort. Doing the same thing. Especially, I've had a couple who have now failed the same level twice, and they're looking at making a third run at it. Well, you have to change what you're doing. It's not a matter of doing more of what you're doing. It's a matter of doing something else. What that is, I really don't know because, again, I don't have your footprint on my site to be able to tell. And each level is different. But I think I can come up with some generalities. And really, I'm speaking to those who didn't make it past the December exam. The first group is the easiest group to speak to. Is you knew going in you weren't ready. You didn't put in the amount of time that was necessary. This is more common at Level 1, somewhat common at Level 2, not so common at Level 3 because Level 3 candidates have been through 1 and 2. They know that, shortchanging themselves on time is not going to work out. But that's the biggest reason why a candidate is not successful. It's not lack of ability. It's probably not faulty process. It's just I didn't put in enough time. And when you're short of time, there's stress. You can't learn under stress. You can't learn in a hurry. Your brain has a speed limit, and if you try to exceed that speed limit, you're going to get nothing but confusion. Confusion leads to frustration, which leads to more stress. That's not going anywhere. That's not going anywhere at all. So for those who recognize that was their problem, but they did okay on previous levels, then just get back at it. You have how many days? You have 100 days to the May exam. Maybe that's enough. Depending on where your score was, it might be enough. I would say that those sections that scored below 50, that's a redo. Because you can get 33% in a section just by answering randomly. So if you're scoring under 50%, you're between 33 and 50, you're somewhat better than random. So that's a redo. Any scores between 50 and 70, I think, require not a complete redo, but certainly revisiting at a slower pace. And anything over 70, well, keep your regular review going. But watch that calendar. It's going to be your enemy. You got 100 days to the May exam. If May is not a critical part of your plan for completing this, if May is not something you really need to do, the lower you scored, the more you might want to think about August. August has Level 1, 2, and 3 this year. Right? So you can do Level 1, 2, or 3 in August. If it's Level 3, give yourself a little bit more time. Level 2, if you do August, you got to wait till May of next year to do Level 3. But you set yourself up a bit better than having just 100 days left. Whatever the case is, however you feel, you have to make that decision on your own of how much time you think you need and how much time you think you can give. But with less than 100 days left for Level 2 and 3, there is no time to sit around thinking about it for a week. You pretty much got to make up your mind and this weekend get right back at it with a new attitude, with an attitude of here's the time that I'm going to have to sacrifice to get to where I want to be. For level 1, you have fewer days, about 10 days fewer. And I'm just counting to the beginning of the exam window. Because there's exam windows, I can't count anymore to the exact exam date. So all I can do is say, here's how many days are to the beginning of the exam window. You might be 2 weeks into that window, so it gives you more time. You can add on the extra days on top of what's there, but I think it's like 89 or 88 days to the start of the level 1 window. That usually takes care of a lot. I just ran out of time. That is more common at level 1 than anything else. Most who fail level 1 will self-own that excuse. Will say straight up, look, I underestimated the amount of time. Level 2, you get, it's sort of half and half. I underestimated the amount of time versus I really did try. I thought I did okay. The results surprised me. Level 3, you don't get a lot of I didn't give it enough time. It's still there. Where somebody says, look, I left it too long. I knew I wasn't ready. I knew I wasn't going to go do well, but I went in to see it anyways, and I did fail, but I don't want to fail again. What do I do? More common at level 3 is I really did try. I thought I knew this so that when you get the did not pass result, sometimes it's a bit surprising. I thought I had this. So the not putting in the amount of time, there's not much more I'm going to say about that. You got to find the time. Simple as that. What if you put in the time though? What if you thought you really knew it, but your results were just poor? Or the one thing I get the 3-4 weeks before any exam, and I'm getting it now, especially with level 2 and level 3 being 100 days away, is listen, I can't seem to retain anything. I can't remember anything that I learned. I have a hard time keeping certain things straight. When do I use this model versus this model? Or, how do I know when I'm using this versus this? How do I know that I'm doing this versus that? It all seems to look the same to me. How do I distinguish between the two? And I'm going to show you a top-down approach that I used when I did my PhD. Within the first semester, I was completely overwhelmed about 5-6 weeks in, and it wasn't working for me. The regular way that I was doing things wasn't working, and I had to basically just stop and say, okay, doing more of this is ridiculous because I'm 6 weeks into this thing, and in the program, you're reading 15 to 20 academic papers every single week. Well, I wasn't retaining any of it. You could have pulled out a paper that I read, 3 days ago and said, what's this one about? And I would have looked at it and said, I can't remember a single thing because there was just so much. The volume of stuff you had to get through was so big. There was so much. You were overwhelmed all the time. Couldn't keep it straight. Layered on top of all of that was your quantitative training. So you had seminars every week, and every week is a different model, different data set, and you got to run a whole bunch of different outputs. And you're sort of just following along a template because you never quite got it. You just didn't have the time to dive into it, and it got to a point where it was like, this is not going to work. I can't keep any of this straight. So I decided that this regular method that I was using of getting this down, understanding this, moving on to the next paragraph, getting that, moving on to the next, that wasn't going to work. There was way too much to do and not enough time to get that done. That you had to make some sacrifices, something had to go. So I used a top-down approach. And and this is what I have on the screen here, I changed my goal. My goal was not to put in so many hours a day. My goal was I'd get to the gym in the morning, and as long as I got into my cubicle by 7 a.m. in the morning, that was good, and I stayed till so long, and then I went home and I did more work till a certain amount of time. I put in a certain amount of hours a day. I tried to check off so many papers a day. Let's get through 4 or 5 academic papers a day because that's what I need for the week. Let's have a couple hours every day for This is what I did, and none of that was working. So I changed to a top-down approach. And when you do that, your goals change. So the goal then became the process that I went through. So I didn't worry how much I did in a day. I worried that I followed my process every day. And if I followed my process, that was the goal. I could check that box and I had one box only each day. Did I follow this process? It didn't matter if I only got through half a paper or 20 papers. It didn't matter if I got through 4 pages of this quant textbook or if I got through 3 readings. As long as I followed the process, I was okay. And then after that, a couple of weeks after that, everything was running smoothly. I had a lot more time for myself. I had weekends back, and no loss of understanding, no loss of content. So it's just a change of the focus for yourself. Rather than focusing on how many hours a day or how many hours a week you need to put in, because the plans that I'm getting, this is what I plan to do over the next 100 days. What do you think? I'm going to give 12 hours a week. I'm going to do this. Well, these are goals set on quantity. I can't see the quality that you're doing because your goals are all quantity based. So you got to change your goals from hours or days per week or readings per day or hours per reading that you're going to put in. You change it and you focus more on the process. So it is not how much you do, rather you're going to focus on how you do it. Because if you really did give it your best and you came up short, then there's something in the process that is wrong as opposed to the quantity of time that you put in. You've checked that box. Something in the process here. So I'm going to show you a technique for recursive learning, which is top down. And rather than focusing on the detail of each reading, we start with the structure and we work down to detail until we got it, and then we stop. When you open up a textbook and you start reading the first page and you read each section and you're working each problem, you're focusing on the detail. You're going from detail to detail to detail to detail. And sometimes with all that detail, it's hard to see the structure of the detail. So when you get to a question and you read it, you go, well, now hang on a second now. Is that this test or is it this test? Am I doing this or am I doing this? And sometimes you have to flip back and read a bit, look at the question, go, okay, well, it's still not clear to me. Things become clearer when you start to see the structure, which is why I say those last 4 weeks before the exam, the review, is when you can start consolidating your knowledge. When you start consolidating, you're starting to build that structure in, and you start to see how the different topics separate and how they mingle together, how one sort of leads to the other, but you can see the separation between them. At least that's what is hoped comes together in that review process. When you consolidate it in your brain, you build that structure. Maybe you don't. So let's start with the structure first. Let's get the structure down, and from the structure we can recursively go into more depth until we get to the level of detail that's needed to answer our question. Then we're done. When you go from detail to detail, you have one question ahead of you and you answer it. One question ahead, because as you're reading, well, what's this now? Okay, there it is. Well, what's this now? There it is. When you start with structure, you have to get used to having so many questions up front, not in behind, but up front, because as you start working top down, you're going to be full of questions. The further down you go, the fewer questions you have. And you go down until you have no more questions. Then you're done. Now you know you've got sufficient enough detail. If you can answer your own questions, you can answer any question. So I'm going to show you an example of this using a level 1 reading. And the level 1 reading I chose was quant hypotheses testing, because that one causes more confusion than any other reading because it's full of tests. Testing of means, testing of variances, single mean, mean differences, difference between means, single variance, two variance, correlation. And it just seems to never end. That when you get to the questions is, how do I know I'm testing the difference between means versus a mean difference? How do I know to use a t or a z or a chi-square or an f? Like, how do I know? And there is a way to know, but it's all this confusion. So let's look at, and again, I'm just picking a reading at random. It's not so much at random. It's one that just causes a lot of confusion. And we'll look at what top-down looks like. And maybe you tried this with one reading that you're just confused over. Give this a try. Take 2 days and go through the reading in a top-down way. And I think what you'll find is that you can get to that level of understanding probably by only reading 50 or 60% of the words that are on the page. You don't need all the words. And I think that might be what is holding some people back is it just seems so, there just seems to be so much you can't keep it all straight. So let's have a look. All right, I'm going to stay off the screen for this one. So this reading is called Hypotheses Testing. And you'll notice that I've got a bit of a tree structure going on here, and more and more layers of more information as you go deeper. So your first pass of the reading, because a good academic reading has structure. And what you want to do is you want to get a lay of the structure first, sort of a map of what the reading is going to do. Look at the sections. The section 1 in every reading is introduction. By the way, you don't actually have to read the introduction. There's nothing there that you're going to miss that isn't somewhere else. The introduction is just telling you what this reading is going to tell you. So what's the point of reading it twice? So if you want to save some time, the section 1 of every reading where it says introduction, you can skip that completely. What I want you to do is I want you to go through the reading and just look at all the major sections. Section 2, Section 3, Section 4. Don't worry about Section 4.1, 4.2. That's your second pass. I just want you to get a lay of what the chapter looks like. Just get a lay of the land. This is your map. So what do we see? What can we extract from this reading right away? Well, we have hypotheses testing, Section 2. Then we have tests concerning means, tests concerning variances, and non-parametric tests. Well, right away, what do we know? We know that there's a difference between testing means and testing variances. Why do we know that? If there wasn't a difference, there wouldn't be 2 sections. It would all be under one section of hypotheses testing. So right away, we know something. We know there's going to be something different about testing means versus testing variances. So if the rest of the stuff wasn't written on the screen, the first thing we'd be saying is, well, what's the difference? Aha, you have a question. What's the difference between testing a mean and testing a variance? You will always find reading far more interesting in textbooks if you read with a question already in your head. So this top-down approach really is meant to put a whole bunch of questions in your head. And some people aren't comfortable with that. They want, as soon as they get a question, they want an answer right away. Give me an answer, because I believe the next sentence has to build off of this, and if I don't get this sentence, I'm not going to get the next one. That's not true. Textbooks are reference books. A well-written textbook should allow you to jump around without any loss of continuity. A well-written reading should allow you to jump from section to section without any loss of continuity. For example, what's the structure here? Well, we have some basic foundational stuff in hypotheses testing. Clearly, I'm going to need that first. But from there, I could go to tests concerning means, or I can go to tests concerning variances. A well-written reading will allow you to do that. These are reference books. They're not reading books. If you're reading these readings from the first word to the last word and you're reading every word, you're probably spending way too much time and you're getting bogged down and lost in all of the detail, and you can't see the structure of the forest. Right? We want to see the structure. Give me a top-down view of a map of a city and I can pretty much draw out where I'm going. But if you put me on street level, I don't have any visibility. Every street looks the same to me. Great. Hypotheses testing. That looks like it's foundational. Then I can go to tests concerning mean and variances and then non-parametric. I got 9.5 pages for hypotheses testing. Really, that's my task. 9.5 pages. I've broken down a reading that is close to 40 pages long into digestible little segments. And by the way, this covers off LOS A to F. I can knock off 6 learning objectives in 9.5 pages. That means I'm knocking off a learning objective on average every page and a half. Well, that's not bad. That's good progress, right? Then go to your next section, tests concerning means. And here we're going to do another pass, and we're only concerned with this section. What are the subsections? Because that will tell you the structure of what you can expect here. 3.1, single mean. 3.2, differences between means. And 3.3, mean differences. And as you're writing these down, you know nothing about this reading. You should be saying, well, 3.2, 3.3, what's the difference here? I see differences and means. I see the word differences and means, differences and means. What's the difference between differences between means and mean differences? Aha, you have another question, right? You're going to read for that answer. That's the detail you want to find. We're not going to start with the detail. We're going to go looking for that detail. Well, here, test concerning means. I know I have to concern myself with three things now. Testing a single mean. Look at that. That covers off one learning objective. Differences between means. That covers off one learning objective. And mean differences. That covers off one learning objective there. This is 7.5 pages. This is 4.5. This is 4 pages. Just because I want to see how big my topic is in this respect. Differences between means, they make a distinction. There are even more subsections, equal variance and unequal variance. So right away, without knowing anything about this topic, I know that there must be something different about testing differences between means when they have equal variances, when the samples would have equal variances versus unequal variance. How do I know that? Because if there wasn't a difference, those subsections wouldn't be there. So I've got the structure of this reading so far in tests concerning means. I know I'm going to have to concern myself with testing a single mean, and there's no subsections, so that seems fairly straightforward. I'm going to look at the differences between means, and of course, there's got to be something about the equal variance and the unequal variance. Well, how do I know? What's the difference between the two? Suddenly, I have questions. Before I even begin, I've got this lovely list of questions that now I'm going to find answers for. And as I find answers and I start checking off all those questions I have, when I have no questions left, I've got all the detail I need. And then mean differences. Notice that there's no subsections between mean differences. So that must be fairly straightforward. Altogether, 16 pages. Tests concerning variance. Single variance, two variances. Well, that seems to make a lot of sense. If you have single mean tests and differences between means, you must have the same thing with variance. Single variance, two variance, and correlation. Notice single variance, two variance covers off one LOS. Correlation covers off another LOS. 2 pages here. Well, that seems, when you look at the pages, you go, it can't be too difficult if it's in 2 pages. It's got to be something really straightforward. This is 4 pages. This is 1.5 pages for correlation. This can't be challenging at all. And then you have your non-parametric. And here there's really only one that they mentioned, which is the Spearman rank correlation coefficient. This is 4 pages. That covers off another learning objective as well. So my task is fairly straightforward. I know exactly what the structure of the reading is. I pretty much know I have to start here, but I'm going to knock off 6 learning objectives. Once I'm done here, I can jump to tests concerning means and take out the big section, or I can knock off a little section and go to tests concerning variance. And when I get to here, I'm going to see that, listen, it's the T and the Z statistic that matter here. Why? Is because means are distributed normally, so we can use normal distributions, which are Z, and semi-normal distributions, which are T. But chi-square distributions don't have a negative tail. They start at 0 because variances can't be negative. Remember, variances are squared, right? They can't be negative. So we learn here that we're going to use a chi-square variable or an F test. Suddenly we know the difference between T and Z and chi-square and F. T and Z belong with means, chi-square and F belong with variances. There's a little bit more detail. And you just keep doing that until you have all the detail you need and you're done. You actually don't have to read the whole reading. You'll find that if you follow this process, that you're reading half the reading because you're done. Now I'm going to show you what you need to do if you follow this in terms of what you need to keep track of, and it's a recursive process. Recursive meaning you're going to start at the level of the whole, at the macro level, the structure of the reading. Then for each section you're going to go into its structure, and then for each subsection you're going to go into that structure until there's no more structure left. And that's a recursive process that you go through. And then for each section, you're going to read until you have the detail. And you're going to say, I get it. This detail belongs in this bucket. I will not confuse it with the other buckets. Because now you know what structure you're reading under, as opposed to just reading a whole bunch of detail and not seeing where it all fits. So let's look at how we then devise a plan that is process-based and not outcome-based. In other words, we're not saying 4 hours a day, 7 days a week for this many hours and this many readings per day, etc. But we're going to devise a plan that is process-based, and every day, as long as we follow the process, we're not going to concern ourselves with how much we get through. That will just happen on its own. So now our goal becomes the process. Let's look at that. All right, so here's a 4-step process. And I should say before I go through all of this, this is executing the plan. This is not really something that I would recommend for absolutely every learning task that you do. This seems to work well when you're overwhelmed. This seems to work well when what you're learning just seems to be so broad and so big and have so much detail in it, it's hard to keep everything straight. There are some topics you'll get to that are so fairly straightforward, you don't have to worry about the structure. You know, you look at the reading and go, yeah, but I don't need a lot of structure here. I get what's going on. That each topic is so distinct from each other that it's not too difficult. And some readings are either just one big topic or one or two main themes, and that's about it. A lot of the more conceptual readings or the more narrative readings. So it's not that you have to do this for every reading. I would say that you would follow this for the most confusing readings. Start with the most confusing reading you can and do it with a structure-based approach and see what happens. And then work your way up to the simple readings. You'll get to a point where, look, this top-down approach is overkill for some topics because I don't need it. Great. It's not that I'm giving you a tool that I want you to use for everything. It's just one tool that when one process doesn't work, try it this way. All right, so what are we going to do? Step 1, do your reading map. Now, I know that I'm going to have some of my subscribers say, can you provide these for us? Can you do a reading map like you did on the previous screen for every single reading? No, I cannot. I can't do it. You must do it. It is not something I can do. It would be like you asking me to go to the gym for you and work out legs today. What would be the point of me going for you? You must do this. So you have to do the reading map, because you have to come up with the questions yourself. So as you're doing the reading map, for example, on the last screen, differences between means versus mean differences. Well, what's the difference between that? It sounds like the same thing. You have to come to that conclusion and develop your own question first. You have to say, well, I have a question now. So do your own reading map, because that's the only way that you're going to come up with your own questions, and it's the only way you're going to know how much detail you need to know, because your goal in this is to answer all your questions, and you're going to go through a process. If you can answer all your questions, you can answer any question. That's how we know something. So do your reading map. Step 2, this is the learning step. Right? This is the pre-learning step. This is just getting a whole bunch of structure. You're going to move on to the learning step, and you have a choice of reading versus video. If you're self-study and you're not using anybody, you're going to read, fine, you're going to read. If you are using a provider, whomever you're using, they all offer video, then you're going to refer to the video. You're going to have a notepad with you. On our site, where the video is, there's a comment section below, and there's a check mark. There are a couple of boxes. There's one that says private comments. Just check on that. All the comments that you put after that are all private. So you can use private comments, or you can use a notepad. All of your questions you'll type in here. Type or write on that notepad. So as you're building your map, start writing your questions out of what questions you feel that you need to know what's going on. So as you write each section out, maybe you have and you look at the subsections. Why is there a difference in testing means versus testing variances? Great. I need to know that. Now, that's not a question you'll ask somebody. It's a question you'll write down, because that's what you need to find out from the reading. That's why I can't do it for you. Maybe you already know. And that's what this is here. Maybe you already know it. So maybe you get the hypotheses testing and you say, you know what, I have done this to death in my undergrad. I've had 2 classes of hypotheses testing. I get it. I don't need it anymore. Well, head to the end of chapter questions or the question bank and check. Make sure you know it. Don't just assume you know it. Maybe you think you know it, but you don't really know it. Head to the end of chapter questions of the question bank. You may not need it. That's why you have to do this yourself, is you must develop your own questions. So step number one, you're going to do your map, and then you're going to either read or watch video, but you've already got your list of questions done. Your goal is to cross off all those questions. Once all those questions are crossed off, you have the detail. You've answered all your questions. You have no questions left. Now, as you're reading, you may come up with more questions. Write them down. Don't ask somebody. You write them down. Your goal is to answer them yourself. You will most likely answer all the questions on your own as you do this approach, because from a top-down perspective, you will have questions because you're not going to get to the detail till later, but when you get to the detail, you'll be armed with questions that you want answers for. The words will be more relevant. You will probably answer them on your own. If you're in the video and you don't seem to be getting the answers, go to the reading. Resist the urge to tug the shirt sleeve of the person beside you and say, what is this? What is that? Go to the reading. Hunt around for it. If you're in the reading and you don't seem to be able to find the answers, go to the video. It's not one or the other. It's both. Sometimes for a reading, the video will work a lot better than the reading. Other times, you'd want to go do the reading as opposed to the video. It's everyone has a different approach depending on the type of content that you're learning. There is no one way to do this. This is the most important point here. The best test of whether you understand a section is if you can answer all your own questions. I mean, if you're asking questions to somebody else and they're giving you answers, you didn't come up with those answers. Maybe they are answers and maybe you go, oh, okay, I get it. It's different when you answer your own question than when somebody gives you an answer. So the best test of whether you know a particular reading or know a particular section is if you have answered all of your own questions. If you can answer your own questions, you can answer any question, which then means that you can spend maybe less time in mock exams and less time in question banks where you seem to only get 60 or 65 and not improve. You should be doing okay at that point, which means, you go to the question bank, you might do 15, 20 questions and you're scoring, 80, 90, 100% on them. You're saying, okay, well, there's no point in me doing more. I got it. Let me move on to something else I'm frustrated with or having a hard time with. So there's step 2. There's the learning process. Step 3, you need reinforcement. So you've learned it. You think you know it. You still need to prove that you know it. The end of chapter questions are a good resource. CFAI question bank is a good resource. If you have my site, the MMQ bank is a good resource. Or whatever provider you have, if they have a question bank. I know some providers don't offer any question bank or any questions at all. Some do. It's a resource you have available. And then there is step 4, which is repetitive and intermittent review. No matter what you learn, if you don't use it, you will lose it. No matter how well you learn it, you could take a whole week and dive into one section and really, really know it. You could be capable of teaching it to a whole room of people at the end of the week, but if you don't use it on a regular basis, you will lose it. You will forget it. That's natural. So repetitive and intermittent review. Here with our site, you can use the review videos on a regular basis. If you have the app, you can download the review videos into the app for offline viewing, so that when you're mobile, you can watch or hear the review videos on a repetitive basis. Some places give you PDFs or slides. You can review the slides and whatever personal notes that you make. And review doesn't have to be long. 5 to 10 minutes per reading is all you really need to review. Every second week or every third week is all you really need to keep it current. So there we go. You can try that approach, a more top-down approach, which adds a lot more structure to the knowledge, which helps you keep it straight. And here your goal is to get the detail in until you understand it. So, for example, in my undergrad, when I took accounting courses, for me they were super, super easy. They were easy A's, which is why I took a lot of accounting courses, because they were just easy A's. I'd get to a particular section, I wouldn't have to read the whole section. After the first couple of paragraphs, I would say, okay, I know where you're going. I get it. I know exactly what's going on. I'd do a couple of the examples and then fine, let me go to the end of chapter questions and look at questions that line up with this section. Let me try a couple of them. If I'm getting them, I don't need to read the rest of the words. I don't know that there's an accounting textbook in all of my undergrad that I used more than 30 or 40% of each reading because I just didn't need it. Well, you could be the same way. If you remove yourself from focusing on the detail and look at it from a top-down approach, you might see more. And you might be able to compartmentalize the differences between sections a little bit better. So give that a shot. And again, just a word of warning, it's not like you want to do this with every single reading. But this is, I think, a very good alternative to the most frustrating readings in whatever level you're in. Try this approach with that reading and see what happens. Just give it a shot with one reading and see what happens. That's it.